Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are 2 Chronicles 18 and 19. Now behind me you will see the back end of my apartment that we stay in when we come to Cape Town, and those are my neighbors. I haven't met them all, and I'm certain one or two of them are good people, but I've also seen some interesting things come out of these flats. And so, that's what God does, doesn't he? He puts us side by side next to some strange people, light next to darkness, if you like. And so the scripture comes to mind. What has light got to do with darkness as I read these chapters? Because what we see is King Ahab in the northern kingdom and King Jehoshaphat in the southern kingdom. Jehoshaphat, great man, following God. Ahab, shocking man, married to Jezebel. Light and darkness side by side. In fact, very closely aligned at this stage in Israel's history, because Ahab's family is related to Jehoshaphat's family. And we see them sitting on their thrones side by side. And Ahab turns to his relative by marriage, Jehoshaphat, and says, "Won't you come with me to battle? I've got this idea. I want to take on the king of Aram." Jehoshaphat says, "Sure, cuz," or friend, or brother-in-law, whatever it was. And then he says, "Well, hang on, we better ask the Lord." So you can imagine Ahab, okay, if we have to. He calls in the 400 prophets, and they say, "Go to war." They're just yes men. Jehoshaphat says, "Don't you have anyone here? Do you have a real prophet anywhere here?" Well, Ahab says, "Well, actually, there is this guy, Micaiah, but I hate him because he says horrible things about me." Jehoshaphat says, "Bring him." Micaiah pitches up, and he says to them, "Go to war, man. It's fine, go to war. I agree with these prophets." Ahab sees something's up, and he says, "You see, I can check in his tone. I can check there's something wrong." And then he says, the prophet says to them, "You know what I saw in heaven? I saw a spirit come before God and say, you know what I'll do? I'll put a false narrative in the prophet's mouth, and Ahab will want to go to war, and in that battle he's going to be killed." And God was wanting to bring to an end the dreadful reign of Ahab. And so, out of God's kindness to Jehoshaphat, and I suppose to Ahab, he says, "Look, this is what's happening." This is how Ahab responds to it. He says, "I tell you what, guys, you put in your royal robes and go out to fight. I'm going in disguise. And then we can go around this. They won't know who they're killing, so they won't kill me." But you know what happens? A stray arrow in the midst of battle hits Ahab in between his armor, and he eventually dies of it. Well, the next chapter, God rebukes, through a prophet, God rebukes Jehoshaphat. Says, "You shouldn't be defending an evil man like this, even if he is related to you." But then we go on to see the rest of what Jehoshaphat's doing. Because he was governing well, he had appointed people to preach in all his villages. He had appointed people to be judges in all his villages. He had appointed people to administer the law in all his villages. God blessed them. So it gets me to reflect on this thing again. Light and darkness. How are we supposed to handle ourselves? Well, the first scripture that comes to mind, we should not be unequally yoked. What does that mean? Well, I think it means that, like God was rebuking Jehoshaphat, you don't take on partnership to that extent where they represent you, you represent them, and you get involved in their fights if God hasn't said so. In addition to that, just because he's family doesn't mean you have to go and fight his battles if God hasn't said so. You are primarily part of another family. That's God's family. Our role as light next to darkness is to point them to the Lord, is to be salt, be light. It's not to merge with them and to become indistinct with them. What has light got to do with darkness? That's what this text is saying. And then one final thought is that when you are running alongside, maybe working for people in darkness, or in a business with people in darkness, and you are put into danger, because Jehoshaphat really was put into danger with this little strategy of Ahab's. Like Jesus, he was silent before his accusers. He trusted God would get him out of his predicament. And so, as you go to work, as you go on through your life, light next to darkness, your job is not to become like them, but to point to the Lord and to realize whose family you're really in.